Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with Sophia. I'm Sophia Ufi Uko, the founder of Violet Simon. And today we have Meredith Brown, the founder of Menopause 51. And we're going to be talking about menopause and some of the issues that women face, including Meredith's experiences and what can be done about some of the issues that women face going through menopause as well. So welcome, Meredith. Thanks for coming to Conversations with Sophia. How are you today?
I'm really good. Thank you very much for having me, Sophia. Really looking forward to our conversation today. Always happy to talk about menopause.
Thank you. And I would love to hear. I would love to hear all about it. I'm obviously not. I've not had menopause yet, but I do remember my mom's experience with menopause, and I know that it was very harrowing, extremely terrible. That's the word.
Yeah. And I think actually it's really important to, even before you enter menopause, to understand it. So I think even if you're younger, it's really important to listen to conversations like these and just grow your knowledge.
Absolutely, that's so true. So let's start with your experience. When did you first experience menopause, and what was that experience like? Did you know what it was when you first had it?
Yeah, I think like many women who go through menopause, I actually didn't realize I was in perimenopause, and it first started for me really when I started to experience mood swings, particularly low mood, really low mood. And at the time, I just put it down to other things because we have so much going on in our lives. And I had a certain, a few things that were going on which weren't great. And I just put it down to, that's why I wasn't feeling so great. But I'm usually the kind of person that bounces back quite quickly from things. And I found that this sense of just feeling really flat, the sort of deep forebodingness didn't really disappear. And I really struggled with that, particularly first thing in the morning, just getting going. I just couldn't motivate myself to want to get out of bed. And that was really when I started thinking, what is this? And then I started experiencing the hot flushes, which are a really common symptom of perimenopause and menopause. And then the night sweats followed, and then a number of other symptoms which I recognized as perimenopause. And then once I realized that, then I was able to start to think, okay, what can I do to support myself with some of these symptoms. So that was sort of how it started with me. And I know that that's not unusual actually for many women who enter perimenopause, and often they think they might be suffering from, for example, early onset dementia, because you can have issues with brain fog and recalling information, and it's really a big part of it is just recognizing that it is menopause.
Wow. And what was your experience with healthcare when you were going through this when you were going through menopause? What was your experience with healthcare?
Yeah, so it's really varied. What people experience when they visit their GP, and I find it quite interesting actually, or quite surprising that considering 51% of the population go through menopause, GPs aren't trained in this area, and so people can have really varied experiences when they visit their GP, and it can depend on a lot of different things. For me, when I approached my GP to have a conversation, I already knew a lot about menopause and perimenopause. I knew I was in perimenopause. Many who go along to the GP don't know that at that time. And so I made sure I booked a double appointment so that I had the time to have the conversation I wanted to have. GPs are really busy and the appointments are usually really short. So I made sure I had that extra time. I made a list of symptoms I was experiencing. I noted down questions I wanted answered. I actually had a really clear idea of what I wanted to get from meeting the GP. So my experience was relatively positive. I did also ask when I booked the appointment if there was someone in the practice, if there was a doctor who had an interest and more knowledge around menopause, so that you know, hopefully I would have a conversation with somebody who knew that, you know, the area. So yeah, so I ended up having quite a good conversation. They shared a lot of information. I think if I hadn't had all the knowledge I already had on it, though, I would have found it quite overwhelming, because it's quite a lot to take on. You know, they're firing a lot of stuff at you in quite a short space of time, but I already knew a lot about it. And so, you know, really for me, it was clarifying a few things and deciding, you know, what was my next sort of steps, what was going to really support me and my unique experience of menopause.
And it's interesting you say that, you know, a lot of GPs are not, because this is actually women's health, right? Menopause. And yet a lot of doctors are actually not trained to understand that. It's quite baffling. And I think it could leave people, it could leave women who are actually going through this experience quite, I mean, for you, for example, you had like that knowledge beforehand. So you were like literally going with an army of information, like, this is what I do. And you're asking the right questions. And imagine if you didn't have that. And, you know, it would have been it could have been, was it still a lonely experience, even though you had all this information?
Yeah.
For you, you know, in terms of, you know, support, you know, was it a lonely experience, or do you think you still had support, even, you know, with that, still going through with that experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think I had support from a lot of different places. I think I was quite fortunate. So, you know, my partner, for example, is, you know, very open. We have a lot of conversations. I talk a lot to my children about it. I have 2 teenage boys. I talk to them about what I'm going through, you know, how I'm feeling, you know, this is my mum's a bit like this today. Because I think it's really important. It's like you're saying, it's about being armed with the knowledge, actually. And it's not just women who need that knowledge. It's everybody, because menopause affects everybody, and everyone will know somebody who's going through menopause. So being aware of menopause is really useful. So in that sense, I felt like I had the support at home, and in the workplace as well. I felt supported. I was fortunate to have a manager who also was willing to listen. You know, often you know, I talk to women who have experiences where managers or even their GP just sort of sidelines them and dismisses it, you know, and doesn't sort of take it seriously, or doesn't realize that it's menopause in the case of GP, if they're, you know, if they're not educated in that area. And you may end up with the wrong treatment even. So I was quite lucky that also in the workplace I had somebody who was open to listening to what I was going through and working with me to, you know, find ways that would help support me so that I could, you know, remain really performing at my best and, you know, feeling confident in my role. And I think that's often a real challenge for those, you know, going through menopause.
And I think I find that, like, some people who talk about menopause, I know from, you know, a few people who I know who've gone through menopause, and even my mom as well, and my aunt as well, when they were going through theirs. Often I think that there's that lack of awareness and knowledge as to this is what is happening. It's lack of education around menopause, you know, so a lot of women who actually go through menopause don't know that they are going. It's only maybe in recent years that you have women who are actually talking about, oh yeah, this could be menopause. But I think before, like long time ago, it was that a lot of women were not aware. And I want to say even people, because it's also doctors. And then so you have, you know, people thinking that maybe they're about to die or something.
No, absolutely. I think a lot of people thought they were going through early onset dementia because, you know, you find you know, particularly in the workplace, I think I found I was really affected by, you know, not being able to recall information. You know, previously I've been able to think in the moment and pull information from previous conversations into discussions and things I'd read, and I was finding it a lot more difficult to, you know, remember and recall information. And for some people that can come across as early onset dementia. I've suddenly got this memory loss. And for a lot of people, they do think, oh, you know, that might be what I'm going through. And I think probably in the past particularly, you know, and still very much now, actually, I know it's starting to get better, but people do find it difficult to speak up. You know, they wonder what they're going through, but maybe they're embarrassed. maybe they're worried about, are people going to treat me differently if I tell them that, this is what I'm experiencing and this is the impact that it's having. And so that keeps a lot of people silent, and they end up, facing it alone, and that makes it really difficult.
And then, speaking of that now, what should people know about menopause regarding the health implications in women? What should people know? Because I think it's about being armed with the right information and being educated, not just for people who are dealing with menopause, but people who are going to deal with menopause, and people who are surrounded with people who will be dealing with menopause, as well as the health. What would you say is, what would you think people should know? What should people know regarding this, the health in women?
So I think it's really important to remember that this is natural. This is a natural transition that all women and a number of the trans and non-binary community will go through, and there are a huge number of symptoms. At the time you go into perimenopause, your estrogen levels and your progesterone levels will drop. And we have an astounding number of estrogen receptors all throughout our body. And that is why there are so many symptoms that are associated with menopause. And so when you're thinking about health implications, you've got these daily symptoms, which can be the physical, like the hot flushes, can be the psychological, like the mood swings. And you're dealing with those on a daily basis. And then you also need to be thinking about the longer term health implications as well. So, a reduction in estrogen can cause an increased risk of things like osteoporosis, cardiovascular disease, dementia, type 2 diabetes. And so you need to be thinking about, what can I be doing to support myself in these areas? And often women find menopause a time where they just kind of take stock and maybe make some improvements in their lives and their lifestyle, maybe their diet, exercise, just to be thinking about all these different elements that are associated with menopause.
Interesting. And it's also interesting, because I think when we also talk about menopause, it's how it affects women. It's very important because you did mention now that it also affects people like non-binary people as well. And I think they often get excluded from the narrative that it affects just women, but they're actually non-binary people who also go through, who go through menopause as well. And do you think that we as a society, what do you think, how do we, it's all about inclusion. And in terms of the narrative and in terms of the language, even in the workplace, what do you think should be done better, for companies and for people to be more inclusive of not just women, but also non-binary people who also deal with menopause, and companies also being supportive of people, who are actually going through menopause in companies, because it's incredibly, I imagine it's incredibly difficult when you're dealing with that as well.
Yeah. So, that's a really good question, actually. And we don't know a lot about the experience of, the trans and non-binary community. It's even more difficult for them to speak up. And so there's very little in the way of research or studies on that group. So what organizations really need to be thinking about is, when they're drafting policies, when they're creating material, support, guidance, they need to make sure they are being inclusive and they're using inclusive language, and that material is equally available to those individuals. And, that's really important. Obviously, organizations need to be thinking about a lot more than that. And, I'm more than happy to talk about that if that's something you think your listeners would be interested in. But, in terms of that community, then I think it is all about making sure anything you produce is inclusive and the language is inclusive.
And then also in terms of, companies generally placing, what should companies put in, like, I mentioned, to do better in terms of people? Are there challenges you experienced? I know you said you got support in the workplace, but do you think that, or do you wish that there was things that could have been done better in the workplace? And even from your work with Menopause 51, are there areas that you think that companies can do better in supporting people who go through menopause? Because I believe that there is enough support, is there?
No, I agree, actually. I think, you know, organizations are, or some organizations are starting to sit up and listen and do something in this space. But really all organizations should be, because they're all affected. You know, we know that 80% of those transitioning through menopause are in the workforce. You know, it's the fastest growing demographic. Women are staying in work longer. They're returning to work after you know, periods of absence. So, you know, this is something which, you know, is you know, a major concern for all organisations. So they should all be looking at it. And really a great place to start is that education piece. So we've talked a bit about this, haven't we? The sort of the power of knowledge and awareness. And really, organisations should be looking at raising awareness of menopause, ideally across the entire workforce. And that will then start to normalise the conversation. So it will start to make menopause just part of everyday conversation. It will start to break down that taboo of people not talking about it. So that is a really good place to start. A policy or guidance is also really important to have in place. It's got to speak to the needs of your people, though. It's got to be tailored. And not just sort of sit on the shelf and gather dust, but actually be engaged with. And used. I think the other area that's important is thinking about your managers. You know, the managers need to be comfortable having these conversations, you know, being able to talk about menopause, being able to talk about what support there is available, what adjustments that they can put in place, you know, understanding their responsibility. So it's important to think about how can you upskill your managers, you know, to be confident doing that. And then I think you know, you need to be thinking about those that are transitioning themselves, you know, so what support have you got? What adjustments can you put in place? You know, what supportive communities can you create, you know, and that could be a menopause network, or it could be something, you know, within your, you know, if you have a women's network or a generations network, it could be that group, you know, meets for, you know, a regular menopause cafe or something, just where people can meet, share experiences. It's all part of, you know, not feeling alone, you know, not feeling alone. And actually those groups can be really useful to get information from and really understand the needs of your workforce. And then from that you can create, you know, workshops or sessions which will help, you know, individuals with, you know, barriers they might be facing or difficulties they might be facing. So really it's about thinking, what's my plan going to be? You know, I want to create this menopause inclusive workplace. So, you know, what can we do as an organisation? Let's start with that education piece. Let's think about a policy. Let's make sure our managers are comfortable talking about it. You know, let's really start to normalise that conversation so that people feel they can speak up, that they're going to be listened to, taken seriously, and that there's the support available for them. And it's organisations like Menopause 51 which can help companies to put something together that's just right for them.
Yeah, that brings me to my next question, actually, because I'm just wondering, like, when did you create Menopause 51? And I mean, they often say that when you create something, often there has to be like a strong inspiration, obviously from your own experience with menopause. And that's why I'm asking, like, so was there like a light bulb moment for you that said, okay, you know what, I'm going to create this organization, this company, you know, called Menopause 51. So tell me a bit about Menopause 51, and what was that light bulb moment, if there was any?
Yeah.
I'm going to create Menopause 51, and what is the mission of Menopause 51?
Yeah, I think there was certainly this, I think it crept up and grew, this sort of desire that there had to be better than what there was. You know, there had to be better awareness, there had to be better support for those transitioning, there had to be better support for organisations, you know, who were looking to create these menopause friendly, you know, workplaces. You know, and as a D&I specialist, I'd spoken to many women who had struggled in the workplace with their symptoms, who had thought about leaving or who had left. And you know, these were women who had spent so many years, reaching the point that they had in their careers. And I, just couldn't believe that, that was what was happening. And then alongside that, you had organizations who wanted to improve gender balance and improve female representation, often at senior levels, which, is often where menopause, will come along. Average age is 45 to 55. And I just wanted to be part of making that better, part of that change, so that we weren't seeing women leaving the workplace, and we were seeing that, that gender balance and that gender diversity and inclusion. And so that was really where Menopause 51 was born. And it was thinking, well, how with the skills that I've got, can I be supporting women and organizations?
And how has that journey been so far?
Yeah, it's been really powerful, actually. Yeah, that's a really great question. It's been really powerful, I think, in terms of the difference you can make, and the feedback that you get from people, when you've delivered sessions, and the power that knowledge, that they say, oh, that's amazing, I now understand this, or oh, I'm going to go and have a conversation with my mother about this now, because I know she's really struggling with this, and I know I can help her now. And that's really powerful, I think, and really inspirational. And when you're in sessions and people feel confident enough to share their stories, which is a powerful message within an organization, actually, that real lived experience, it's really quite humbling, I think, and so from that perspective, Menopause 51 just sort of goes from strength to strength, and being able to share those experiences with each client that we work with is, it's just really special. And I think that was the vision, was to get people to that better place. So, but there's a long way to go, and we're only just really cracking the surface, aren't we? But yeah,
I mean, and it's amazing. And I think for me, for example, I'm not yet in menopause, I'm not perimenopausal, but I have been thought about menopause is quite daunting even for me. Like, I feel like I think about what my mom went through. I think about what other people that I know have gone through, and and the stories I read, and it seems like this very hideous, incredibly excruciating phase in your life. So for people, can you give a little education, like, what is it, something to be scared about? And what can people who even are not approaching menopause, or getting close to the age, what can they do better? I know you touched earlier when you said things about diet and all that, but in terms of the fears and the myths, and even it being like a taboo because people don't talk about those things. But I think there's a lot of need for people to be educated, for younger people to know these are the things that might happen, but it's going to be okay. Because I when I was younger, I did think that, well, I used to say to myself, oh God, I hope I don't live up to that age, because it looks like I'm going to die or something like that. And that was quite thinking about it now, it's a really, really insane thing to think about, but that's because of the lack of education. So what would you say on that issue?
So I would say, I can understand how it, can seem a really daunting thing, and oh my gosh, what, I'm going to go through this experience, what is it going to be like? And yes, 75% of people will experience symptoms. 25% of those will experience more severe symptoms. But I think what's really important to understand is that with the right support, you can manage these symptoms. And with knowledge, that is going to help you make decisions that are going to be right for you. So, you know, having an understanding of menopause now, even if you're, you know, pre-menopausal, is really important, because then you will recognize when you are in perimenopause. You'll have a positive mindset around it, and you will know what is there to support you, what is available to support you. It's really important to find someone you can speak to. You know, and you may not feel confident speaking up in the workplace, but a friend or a family member, it's really important just to feel you can speak to someone, because that in itself is really, really useful. And then it's about understanding what are the different things you can do to manage the symptoms, because there is a lot you can do. And some of the things are lifestyle, you know, like we touched on. There are medications you can take. Hormone replacement therapy, HRT, has been talked about a lot recently. And that is, you know, a natural plant-based product, which, you know, increases your levels of estrogen. And for many women, that is a lifesaver. You know, it really brings their lives back, particularly those who are really struggling with some of their symptoms. But there are other therapies. There's cognitive behavioral therapy, some people acupuncture, hypnotherapy. There are lots and lots of different things that can support women during this time in their lives. And I think that's what's really important to remember. And everyone's experience is going to be unique. So it's about finding what works for you, you know, and being as open as it can be. And if you're in the workplace and you're in a workplace where maybe it's not talked about, maybe it's still very much taboo, you know, maybe you're worried, you know, if I raise my hand and say I'm going through this, that you know, that my career will be affected. You can, you know, just find someone within the workplace to talk to, and it could be your women's network, it could be others who are going through it. It could be someone in HR, it could be your employment assistance program. But even if you can just find others to talk to and start a little group up where you can support each other, then from that it can actually grow to something where you can have an impact within the organization, really, to start the conversation.
Amazing. That's very useful. Thank you so much. And you know, I was going to touch on, well, it's the same thing in terms of even as a business person, as an entrepreneur, and then the toll it takes in you when you're running a business. And even though you don't have like people to answer to, not well, you do have people to answer to, you know, but you're running, it's your show, right? It could still be daunting because you may feel like you're missing out on something. But yeah, thank you so much, Meredith, for coming on to Conversations with Sophia, sharing your insights, very useful insights, and your experiences and your journey on from building Menopause 51 to your experience with menopause and what we can do both as individuals, you know, as a community and as a society in furthering, you know, educating ourselves and supporting women who are actually going through, women and people who go through menopause as well. Thank you. So Meredith, again, is the founder of Menopause 51, and you can connect with her on LinkedIn, as well as on her website. Her services she offers through Menopause 51, and the details to her website is going to be included in the description of our talk show. You can also find our series 1 of our magazine book Disruptors, which is also available on our website. And our Disruptors series is a magazine book which amplifies and features stories of women from diverse backgrounds who are challenging the status quo to create a positive impact for women, underrepresented communities, young girls themselves, and others. And our first series features stories of over 35 women, and we are working on the second series as well. So get the copy of the first series on our website at www.violetsimon.co.uk, which again is going to be included in the description of this talk show. Thank you again for listening to Conversations with Sophia. Thank you, Meredith, for coming on. And I hope you have a lovely week. I hope you've been able to learn one or two things, or if anything, be inspired from this conversation on menopause. Have a lovely day and see you next time. Bye. you.